Smith is present. Also, please note in the audience is Fred with Finance, Eric with Administration, Mayor Kim, Jared Holter, and Karen with Finance, and Amanda in Legal, and I know I saw Amy in HR, so she'll be back. I know we have a guest, I'm guessing, for our financial reports tonight, so I'll let him introduce himself in a few minutes. And also online, I have Troy Miller, Carrie Burmaster, Troy Goody, Scott Peterson, and I think that's everyone. Number 2, approval of minutes from the previous meeting.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alder Smith, second by Alder Olson to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of said motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Also in attendance is Dan Wick. Number 3, public input limited to 3 minutes per individual. If there's anyone in attendance who would like to give input at this time, they may do so. Please list your first and last name and your address, and you are given 3 minutes. First call for public input. Second call for public input. And Amanda, you don't see anyone who's asking? Thank you. Third and final call. I'll close that portion of the meeting and move on to the printed agenda. Consideration and possible action on the following items. Number 4, finance. Number 4, presentation of the 2020 audited financials from Hawkins Ash Certified Public Accountants. So Fred.
This evening, we have Joe Haas from Hawkins Ash CPAs here to present the 2020 audited financials for the city of Onalaska.
Welcome.
Thank you. As Fred said, my name is Joe Haas. Here to present the 12/31/2020 financial statements. I actually personally was not involved very much in the audit this year. Justin Peterson is the audit manager that's in charge of your audit. He had a personal matter come up at the last minute, so I'm pinch hitting for tonight. But I actually was in charge of this audit for many years past and have presented to this committee before, so it's good to be back. You should have 3 bound reports that were given to you earlier. The one I'm going to cover says summary financial report at the top. It's a much thinner document. The thickest document you have is the full financial statements with the auditor's opinion. If you ever are referring to the financial statements or get questions about them from the community or anybody, you should refer to the full set of financial statements. The summary is really just for this presentation. So before I get into the numbers, I just wanted to touch quickly on what an audit is and why the city has an audit. The purpose of an audit is for an independent third party, CPA firm like us, to look over your books and issue an opinion on if we think the books are fairly presented. So the reason we do that is that there are users of your financial information, the public, the city council, those that would purchase your bonds. They all are curious about your financial condition, and you could give them financial reports, but they want assurance that those numbers are correct. And so you pay a CPA to go over the books, do our audit procedures, and issue an opinion. The opinion we issued this year is called unmodified. Is actually the best one you can get. It means that as presented, your financial information is materially correct. So that's the purpose of an audit. How we go about it is there's really 3 phases that we focus on. We have a planning phase, we have a field work phase, and then we have a wrap-up phase. The planning phase is where we contact Fred or anyone else in City Hall. Sometimes we contact a board member, or a council member, excuse me, and gather information, new information that's happened during the year. We add that to what we already know about the city and its financial condition, and we develop a plan for how we're going to audit it. We do it based on risk. So if anything new comes up, say COVID-19 was something new that came up, we evaluated how that affected the city, and we worked that into our audit plan. So we do that before we ever even come to City Hall. We call that the planning phase. And then we come here, a team of auditors, usually 3 or 4 of us for 3 to 5 days, depending on what's new and what's going on that year. Come to a conference room here. Fred provides us with a lot of information, and we organize it and do our audit procedures and get the bulk of our work done while we're here. And then we go back to our office, prepare the financial statements, and draft our opinion and finish up. So that whole process takes several months. we're only here for 5 days. But that's kind of how the audit is laid out. And I thought that you might find that interesting before I get into some of the numbers here. So starting on the summary financial statements, page 2 says independent auditors report at the top. It's really kind of just saying, this is for presentation purposes only, refer to the full financial statements for the full audit opinion. On page 3, so page 3 has your combined balance sheet and then a graph that shows your fund balances on the right side there. So page 3 takes all your fund financial statements and puts them into one column. So this is the general fund, debt service, all your capital projects, and all your utility funds into one column. There's a lot of information here. I'm just going to touch on a couple of things and point out why things changed and if that's what we would have expected. So you can see the very first line there says cash and investments. At the end of 2020, it was 37 million. At the end of 2019, it was 42 million. Some of the remember, this is a snapshot on December 31st, 2020 of how much cash you had. I believe a lot of this is due to bond proceeds. Sometimes they're not all spent at year end and they carry over, and then you spend them as the year goes on and you have less cash at year end. And that's the case here. The next thing I want to point out is in the middle of the asset section, it says interfund. Follow that to the right there, 2,174,000 compared to 6,021,000. That is what one fund owes another fund. And that too is because of bond proceeds. The capital project funds get the cash in and then they pay it to the utilities when they use it for their capital project. So again, we would expect that to decrease, which it did. And then if you look at the bottom of that first section there, the total assets, 128 million compared to 135 million, down because of those reasons we know about and anticipated. Moving on to the liability section, you can see the third line down says interfund payables. So that's the exact same amount as the interfund receivable. One fund owes another fund. So there you see that. And then your long-term debt is towards the bottom of the total liability section. This is just your utility funds debt. It's 25 million at the end of 2020, 27 million at 2019. So it decreased there because of payments, and I'll go over the total debt of the city in a few minutes here. So the last thing I want to mention on this page is the bottom, the equity section. The first line there says net position. Those are your utility funds, mainly water, sewer, and storm water net position. You can see it's 49 million compared to 51 million from 2019. The majority of that is your investment in your infrastructure. So it's not necessarily spendable position. It's what you've invested in over time and what you keep up with your rate. Your rates go to replace that infrastructure. So the second line there says general fund balance, 9,096,000 at the end of 2020, up from 8,879,000 in 2019. So it increased about $215,000, which is a good sign. One benchmark that we look at is that fund balance is broken down into different categories. There's certain restrictions on some of it. You've designated some of that money to be spent on certain things, so you can't touch it. And the remainder is what we call unassigned. It's the fund balance in the general fund you're free to do with what you would want to. That is 8.5 million, so it's a very good percentage of your total. We compare that number to a year of expenses in the general fund and get a percentage. So your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of your total expenses is 90%, which is very, very high. Many times communities look for 20 to 30% of that. So your general fund balance is strong. That's the main takeaway there. And then the last line there says other fund balances. That's all your other fund balances combined into one. You can see it increased by about 250,000. The graph on the right shows your general fund in pink there, fund balance, and then all your other funds in green. You can see the general fund is slowly increasing. And the other fund balances, the spikes there again can be from bond proceeds that are on hand at the end of the year. And so in general, it's increasing. Okay. Moving on to page 4. These are your general fund revenues for 2020. And you can see the graph there on the right side of that shows you a breakdown of where the revenue for the general fund is coming from. You can see the majority of it in red there is taxes and special assessments. The next biggest piece in the graph is intergovernmental at 18%. So that's state shared revenue, transportation aids, things of that nature. Really, the only thing I want to point out on here, because the city does a good job budgeting and controlling its revenue and expenditures, is kind of in the middle of the page there under public charges for services. There's a line that says culture, recreation, and education. There's a $206,000 budget and only $24,000 collected. That's because of this. There's really no services for Park and Rec. Pool was closed. Rentals for facilities, things like that due to COVID were just not happening. So that's what we would expect to see that revenue. So if we go down to the bottom, total revenue, you budgeted $10,183,000. You actually collected $10,084,000, so about $100,000 less than budgeted. Again, COVID. But if you compare it to the right column there, you collected about $310,000 more than in 2019. That's the general fund revenue. General fund expenditures is on page 5. Again, the same breakdown, budget actual compared to last year. And then the graph on the right side there shows where the money is being spent. Public safety is 59%. Excuse me. General government is 18%, public works at 12%, and then culture and rec at 9%. Again, the city does a good job controlling expenses. I'm not going to drill down on many of these. I'll just point out that, again, under culture and recreation towards the bottom of the page there, library, parks, recreation, swimming pool expenses were down due to COVID. So total expenses, you budgeted $10,183,000. You actually spent $9,868,000, so about $315,000 less than budgeted. But you did spend about $350,000 more than last year, which was to be expected compared to the budget. On page 6, so that was general fund stuff. Page 6, and then the graph on the opposite of page 6 there is your water, sewer, and storm. So we're talking about different funds here. These are utility funds that are run like a business. So you have user fees that you charge, and that's how you fund the fund. The graph on the right side there is really what I want to focus on. That shows your operating income or loss for the last 4 years. Water is blue, sewer is that brownish color, and the storm water is green. So you can see the water operating income has gone down over the last 4 years. And the way you remedy that is through rate increases, which the city is doing a two-step. So 2020, there were some increases. In 2021, there'll be some more. So that's good. The sewer, you can see it was an operating loss all 4 years, but the rate increases in 2020 have decreased that loss as they to be. And then the stormwater has been pretty consistent at the net operating loss for those 4 years. So that graph is a good way to look at it. Those numbers show up right in the middle of page 6. It says operating income and loss. You can see the actual number and how it's calculated. It's the operating revenue less the operating expenses. But I think the graph is a better way to look at it. The PSC looks at your rate of return for water. That's how they judge if you need to increase your rates. In 2020, the rate of return was actually a negative 0.6. 2019, it was 0.17, so a pretty small rate of return, and the rate increase is looking to get a rate of return of about 4.9%. So according to the PSC's calculations, that rate increase is warranted. Page 7, so we talked about the general fund and we talked about your utility funds. Page 7 is the rest of the funds kind of listed there, and I'm not going to go through it all, but it shows you the fund balance at the beginning of the year, the revenues and expenses, and then the fund balance at the end of the year. Actually, I think the biggest benefit on this page is just kind of to see what funds the city has. Special revenue funds there at the top. They have exactly what it sounds like, a unique revenue source that comes in, and that is what the fund is designed for, and then those funds are spent. You have a debt service fund, which accounts for all the expenses for the general government debt. And then you have your capital project funds. There's a new capital project fund every year. Bonds are issued to fund those projects, and then those funds are spent over time. And so that's why some of those capital projects go back to 2008, 2011, 2015. Those funds are still open as those funds are being spent. And then on the bottom there is your remaining enterprise funds. We talked about water, sewer, and storm. There's also tourism, cemetery, Omni Center, and the parking ramp. Those funds are operated like a business. They have user fees that are generated to. Okay, and then page 8, last page here. Independent auditor's report, we talked about as unmodified, or we would say quote unquote, a clean auditor's opinion. That's the one you're looking for. The fixed assets there, you can see, this is the third paragraph down. The city added $5.1 million of general fixed assets for various projects, mostly infrastructure. The water and sewer and storm utilities added $4.1 million of fixed assets. Again, when I say fixed assets, I mean infrastructure. And then long-term debt, the general obligation long-term debt increased by $1.5 million to a total outstanding obligation of $43.7 million. The city's debt limit is actually $108 million, so you're less than half of that debt limit at the end of the year. And then in addition to looking at the numbers, those last two paragraphs there, we look at internal controls. So we test a sample of transactions for various revenues and expenses, and issue our thoughts on the internal controls, and we didn't have any findings. And then we have a communication with those charged with governments. That's the city council. The third document you have is that communication. If there's any problems we ran into or anything that we feel that you would need to see, we will put that in there. Most of it now is really just what we have to say. There's nothing really of note. The journal entries that we make during the audit are in there, but those are ones that we know we're going to make. We do those sort of every year to help record fixed assets and some of the pension information. So none of those are a surprise. And so that was the 2020 audit. If you have questions, I know some of that is kind of thick sometimes, but I'd be happy to try to answer your questions. If you think of anything after I'm gone, feel free to reach out. Fred knows how to get a hold of us, and we could be happy to answer your questions.
Any questions of Mr. Haas this evening of committee members? Hearing none, Mr. Haas, thank you so much for your time and coming out this evening. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Fred, should we go ahead and place on file?
Accept
Accept and place on file. I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept and place on file.
Second.
Motion by Alder Smith, seconded by Alder Olson to accept and place on file the 2020 audited financials from Hawkins Ash Certified Public Accountants as presented this evening. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of said motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item number 5, 2021 Omni Center financials. Is this Fred or Dan or both?
I'll start.
Okay.
In your packet this evening, F as in Fred, -5, page 1 is the balance sheet, along with the page 2 is the liabilities, and 3 is the fund balance. Go to page 4. For those that had a chance to read the minutes from the room tax, this is the same information that they have seen. Seeing that things are on a positive note as it relates to the room tax funds, which generates dollars going to the Omni Center. Down below, we have a footnote number 1 of the $32,064.32 coming into the Omni Center. $12,645.82 is related to room tax, which is 1% of the sales for first quarter. $15,793 was funds going into the Omni Center, which is 25% of their contribution. $3,625 is 25% of the additional contribution from the tourism fund, totaling $32,064.32. With that said, also you'll see on page 5 the expenditures. Dan may or may not want to comment on that, but overall, to date, we currently are looking at, between the revenues and expenditures, a $40,112 deficit at this point. One of the things I will mention is back on page 2, and I guess I wasn't really, kind of caught me off guard a little bit, that Dan actually did that much in liquor sales, but on page 2, you'll see that he took in, we usually have a fund balance starting out of about $2,000. So he did over $11,000 in liquor sales in the first quarter, of which will be transferred into to reduce that $40,000 deficit.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Anything else to add? Okay. Dan says no, so that's fine.
I have a question, just maybe for Dan. This was a COVID year, kind of crazy. So, we had a lot of revenues that we didn't get, that we did budget, that showed up in the audit. What's your thoughts that, hadn't had COVID and what we had budgeted and what we did? Do you think we would have been close to being in the black or red, or just your thoughts? I know you don't.
2020 was on schedule to, the first quarter of 2020 was our busiest year that we had unscheduled. But when we canceled about 80 some events throughout the year, so 2021 started off slow. We still hosted the same number of tournaments. We hosted some events. We did have a lot of events cancel, but like for the tournaments that we hosted, limited participants, so concession sales were down, not as many teams were coming to town, things of that nature. We held a lot of the events. We did have a lot of our larger trade show type events either canceled or moved back in the year. So, we're not doing too bad. We have a good next few months coming up. Our ice schedule, we're actually have a contractor coming in tomorrow to paint the rink for us due to limited staffing. But we have the busiest summer of ice schedule currently on the books that we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. So we see a lot of activities coming back. It's, hopefully we continue to move in the right direction. So.
Good. And that's what I thought, just kind of, you can start to see the activity all taken off. So hopefully we can recoup some of that yet this year.
Right. That's our hope. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. So I will entertain a motion to accept and place on file.
Make a motion, we place the Omni Center financials on file.
A second.
Motion by Alder Olson, second by Alder Smith to accept and place on file the 2021 Omni Center financials as presented this evening. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of said motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. 6, 2021 general fund financials.
Okay, on page 7, 8, and 9 represent the assets, liabilities, and fund balance. If you don't have any questions there, I'll slide to pages 10 and 11. There's a little footnote. I know it's somewhat hard to read, but it's very disgusting is when you have $3.2 million in investments from capital projects and get $30 of interest. Interest, when this budget was put together, we were sitting at, in September of last year, we're getting 0.13% for interest. Current rate is 0.05. What this amounts to is roughly the interest income, if this continues for the year of 2021, the general fund will be short approximately 25,000, where we budgeted 50. I felt that was significant to keep an eye and watch on. Talking to some of the local banker individuals that we deal with, they don't see anything, maybe possibility of something late fall. With that said, that was pretty much, unless you have any questions, expenditures pretty much self-explanatory. Unless you have any questions for me or Jared or anyone else.
Thank you, Fred. So any questions of Fred or staff of the 2021 general fund financials?
I think Jared has a good point that he made the other day is because of what's going on with the winter, we're hoping that the snow and ice account that always has a tendency to steal some of the dollars, expenditures may be all right this time.
So I will entertain a motion to accept and place on file.
I'll make a motion that we accept the 2021 general fund financials and place on file.
Second.
Motion by Alder Smith, second by Alder Olson to accept and place on file the 2021 general fund financials as presented this evening. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of said motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Item 7, School Resource Officer for 2021-2022. Is this Amanda or
Is
Fred?
Chuck in attendance?
I'm sorry,
Is Chief Ashbeck in attendance?
Troy is.
Yes. Okay.
Troy, would you like to, are you here attending to give us a report this evening?
I think this is on pretty much more informational at this point. The information that was passed to me from the chief earlier this week was that this is set to go to school board. It is apparently on their June 14th agenda. So once they have their meeting on this, we'll know more whether they are accepting it or if they're accepting as is or wanting to make changes to it. And we will have more information after that time.
Okay, thank you so much for the update. Fred?
And I believe they'll be meeting somewhere between now and before the council meeting. So I'm pretty sure we'll be having this on the council agenda. And if we do have an answer, then we'll be able to take an appropriate action.
Well, their board meeting is the 14th. Are you saying that they'll take some action prior
It's
to?
on the agenda.
Okay, but
Is that the same night as ours?
no. So our meeting is on the 8th, but they meet the second Monday of the month, which is the 14th. That's what he just said.
Okay.
So I'm guessing that they can't take action until after we meet them, correct? I would assume. So, okay, thank you. So number 8, City of Onalaska claims handling procedure. Is this Amanda?
Yeah, so as part of preparing for a world without Fred, we took a look at some of the stuff that Fred does that perhaps is maybe not traditionally a finance thing, and claims handling typically falls under generally the city attorney's office. I think just with not being in-house prior, it was easier to have it run through finance. And so looking forward to shifting that under legal, I kind of reviewed the process and the procedure. Our threshold for taking claims to council was really low. We take basically every claim to council, and that can be really frustrating for residents because it elongates the process. And also, most claims are generally routinely denied. And so this does give myself or whoever the city attorney is the authority to to approve or deny claims, settle claims up to $5,000, which is actually a relatively low threshold in comparing to other communities. But my goal was really to make the process more straightforward to people making claims so they understand what types of claims are routinely denied, what the process is. I think we have a lot of people that make claims that really think that their claims may be approved for very routine things like sidewalk falls, things like that, which are very clearly just statutorily something we would deny. And so this tries to make that a little bit more transparent on the front for those individuals and just kind of updates the process. It's a fillable form that they can submit, and it will email the form to us online. So it's just a little bit more user-friendly as well.
The one question that I had is, first of all, for me personally, I think this is a great idea. Just all the times I know that we've dealt with these in closed session, I think about the time that we spend on these and such. To me, it just seems to be just the obvious to go ahead and slide this over to legal. I personally am comfortable with the 5,000 and under. The only question I had was, I wasn't exactly sure though, will we not be aware of any claims at all if they're 5,000 and under, or will we at least will we be aware that some have been filed or?
I mean, I can send out an email notification if you'd like some kind of.
This echo is killing me. I'm trying to watch what you're saying and look at you at the same time, so I'm having difficulty.
I mean, I would be happy to send you like an email if you wanted just an email update related to any claims, or I could copy you on a denial if you wanted.
And I'm not certainly, I'm not necessarily asking for that. I guess I'd like to hear what the other alders also think, whether or not they, what they want to know. I was just wondering, because I know when I look at the actual form that someone would be filing, it's very clear that claims exceeding 5,000 will be reviewed by the city finance committee, but I just didn't know whether or not we would see any of them that was less than 5. So I'm kind of neutral whether or not I want to see them. So I don't know whether Alder Smith or Olson, what their thoughts are. Tom?
I'm fine with, I think, you know, it makes sense to move that. But I would like to know about them somehow, maybe just a notification, whether it's an email or, you know, something that we could at least see where that cash is going out for. I mean,
Or maybe if it's even quarterly, or for me, it's whatever is an easy, streamlined, you know, not to micromanage, but just something so we're maybe aware. Eric, did you want to add something?
Yes, keeping in mind that the request for the attorney to also manage that is to deny those requests under $5,000 upfront instead of having those requests come to council for your denial. So it's not just the payouts that the attorney would be managing under 5,000. It would be the denials, which again, mostly what we do. I concur anything that expresses liability on the city by doing a payouts that, you know, certainly should be notified of that. I think that's fair.
Amanda?
Perhaps I could, if we're paying something out, I could notify council. Otherwise, I could just do a yearly report of all the denials.
I don't know what,
I'm okay with that. I mean, I guess, like Eric said, a little different perspective than when I looked at it, because it's mostly denials. So most of them will be denials. So I guess we don't really need to see those. But if there's some monies, I guess it would be nice to have that reported somewhere, you know, quarterly or annually, or maybe even through the administrator's report.
Mayor Kim?
I didn't have a microphone. Fred, did we discuss this once years ago? I feel like we discussed it years ago, and at that time, the council decided to have them still come to council because they wanted to know even if they were getting denied, because a lot of times the counselors get contacted if the person is unhappy with the outcome. And I'm not saying we have to do that. I'm just saying from a historical standpoint, at that point, the council did want to know that these things were happening.
So,
Does that match what you remember, Fred? Does that match what you were thinking?
right, and I'm just kind of wondering, so that may, with that line of thinking, which I understand, that would probably necessitate a report maybe oftener than later. Because if we get a report on a quarterly basis that there was denials, then it would be too late. And I'm all for streamlining the process, but I do agree that if we get phone calls and then we sit here and go, what are you talking about?
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's the thing is there an appeal process with this? Because it doesn't say anything about that. Let's say you deny it, but you know, we get called because they're not happy and we don't know anything about it. Is there a process, an appeal process that maybe only at that time would we be aware of that? I don't know.
Well, and Amanda, would it work if, I know, like, for example, right now, I know council has shifted the responsibility of where we don't see all the fire permits, the fireworks permits.
Revenues, yeah.
So, and when there's certain types of permits, then Joanne just emails us what they are as they come in. I'm just wondering if it'd just be easier for you just, as they come in and then we're emailed and then as they come in and then we're aware of it. And so then you don't have to wonder, do I have to do a quarterly report and look back on them? And I mean, would that be okay for us would that work for you to just?
I think rather than getting the email on the front, I think you would want the email on the end.
Okay, yeah.
So, whether, if
What's
it's
action is
denied or, what the result is, we could just email council a copy of that.
I think.
It makes sense that we don't need to be involved in every one of those details. I think sometimes in closed sessions, some of those are, black,
A lot of them are
black and white.
are quite small.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're. So yeah, so I mean, I perfectly am fine with this, but I don't, as part of the minutes, we don't really need to make a motion as far as where we're going to, as far as how you're going to distribute them to us. I'm assuming since we've all talked about this right now, with that understanding that we'll we'll all be notified at the back end once it's been.
It might be nice to get the rest of the council's perspective on that, because I know that, you know,
Well, and we can put this on the non-consent for.
yeah, to just kind of have a discussion to that. I support it. It
Yeah.
makes sense. But I think it would be nice to make sure they're all on board on that. Just to
Sure.
make sure that there's any concerns about that kind of stuff, what we hear about it, that it's been discussed.
So I will entertain a motion.
I will make a motion that we approve the claim handling procedure identified in F8 with being referred to the city council, or just we approve it in concept, but discuss it at the next council meeting. That's close enough? Motion, yeah.
So motion by Alder Smith, second by Alder Olson to approve the City of Onalaska claims handling procedure as presented this evening and refer it to council for a final, for further discussion.
I like that. Yeah, that works for me. You too, Jim? Yeah.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of said motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Under Personnel, number 9, update from Human Resources on staffing. Amanda. And it's going to be Amanda who was taking this. I know a memo came out dated today via email.
Yes, so I sent out a memo dated today. It's pretty straightforward. We are still working on filling a couple positions. Park and Rec is looking for an office specialist. Jared is hiring for an operator, soon to be 2 operators with a retirement that's upcoming. And then we have a finance director, which we're going to address under a separate agenda item. We did hire a building supervisor for the Omni Center, so he will be starting June 21st. PFC is meeting, it met on police to establish an eligibility list. And so there was a primary list for immediate hire and a secondary list for the July positions. PFC meets again tomorrow night to do firefighter interviews. And so we're excited to kind of wrap up the eligibility list for public safety and get those positions filled. So it's been pretty busy. I don't know if Amy has anything else to add, but lots going on in the hiring world.
I know Police and Fire Commission, they were here late last week, so I'm guessing they'll be here late this week again. Any questions of Amanda at this time about staffing? Okay, I'll move on. Thank you again, Amanda. Number 10, potential modifications to the body camera policy. So who's going to take this? Will Troy or Amanda?
I guess, are there any questions on the body cam policy? So this was reviewed by administration, by the police department. We did send it to CIVMIC for review. They had one small change that we made, just referencing record retention in the state statute and Marcy's law. And so we are just bringing it forth for you to look at tonight.
Need a motion?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the potential modification to the body camera policy as stated in P10.
Second.
Motion by Alder Smith, second by Alder Olson to approve the policy 422 body camera policy, body worn cameras. Discussion. Fred?
The only thing I wanted to add is Chief Ashbeck thought it'd be a best to see if there are any other changes. So the changes that were recommended by CIVMIC will be made and put in your packet because they were not made in this document at this time.
Thank you, Fred. Any other discussion at this time? Hearing none, all those in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Item 11, recruitment of a new financial services director. This is Eric or Amanda.
You're doing so
We
well so far.
are scheduled to interview 2 potential candidates on Friday morning. So we did have some new candidates that we're excited about. And I think, you know, pending the outcome of Friday will depend kind of on what our next steps are.
Eric?
And those next steps, as discussed earlier, could be hiring a recruitment firm or hiring a temporary position in the meantime. But again, at this point, we're excited about the opportunities to interview on Friday. So we aren't proposing moving forward until we have some sense of what Friday brings.
Will we want to have this on the agenda for Tuesday for a possible update then? Okay, thank you.
So,
Okay. Anything else regarding that topic? Well, good luck on Friday. And item number 12, adjournment.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Alder Smith, second by Alder Olson to adjourn at 7:57. No discussion. All those in favor of said motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming in this evening.